Samantha Markle has never told me a lie. Every single thing that she has said about either you or Meghan has checked out factually. And she is now suing Meghan. You're prepared to testify for Samantha against Meghan? Is that correct?
This whole narrative starts with one person, Samantha Markle. For years, she was brushed off, labeled the jealous half-sister with an agenda, someone easy to ignore rather than listen to. But Samantha was not chasing the spotlight. She was chasing precision. She was the first to say something about Meghan's age did not sit right, and she did it with the quiet certainty only a sibling can carry. Instead of shouting or speculating, she laid out dates, memories, and shared family moments that could not be edited for an audience. She was the one who pointed at the timeline and said, "Look again, none of this lines up." For years, people tuned her out. Yet now, piece by piece, everything she described is resurfacing, aligning with evidence that was never meant to surface. When Thomas Markle, their own father, later stepped forward and confirmed that what Samantha had been saying was true, the carefully maintained image around Meghan began to tremble. He made it clear he loves both his daughters, but he also made it clear that one of them has not been telling the truth. Samantha did not invent this mystery. She simply refused to let it stay buried. She became the first domino, the first fracture in the royal glass, the first person willing to say out loud what documents would later echo. Once Thomas's recollections opened one door, another opened behind it, filled with dates that refused to fit. Meghan Markle's official birth date appears everywhere, August 4th, 1981. It is in palace records, biographies, press packs, and global profiles, treated as unquestionable fact. But as Meghan's fame grew, Thomas noticed something that made him pause. Public comments where Meghan referenced her age seemed out of sync with the milestones he personally remembered. School years, acting beginnings, and childhood stories suddenly felt shifted forward, like the timeline had been stretched. Once that suspicion exists, even quietly, you start double-checking the calendar. You start asking, do these numbers actually work? What Thomas remembered did not align with the dates echoed worldwide, and for the first time, those close to Meghan began whispering the same question. Was Meghan Markle truly born in 1981? Then came an unexpected piece of the puzzle, an old magazine buried in an archive, March 1997. Back then, teenagers flipped through 17 magazine the way teens scroll social media now, chasing advice, trends, and a glimpse of the life they wanted. Deep in that issue, on a quiet page, sat a simple printed list, names and ages of young women hoping to be noticed. On that list were two small words, Meghan Markle, age 21. Not 15, not close, 21. If Meghan was born in 1981, she would have been 15 in March 1997. Yet the magazine, printed long before royal handlers or palace PR teams cared about her details, put her at 21. That is a 6-year gap, not gossip, but a number stamped in ink, frozen in time. This listing comes from a world far outside royal protection or modern media spin, from a moment before anyone had a motive to adjust anything about her age. On its own, it suggests a birth year closer to 1975 or 1976, not 1981. When that page resurfaced, it did more than raise eyebrows. It rattled the foundation of her narrative. This is not a minor slip. It outlines a different life, one where Meghan was not a 20-something entering Hollywood, but a nearly 30-year-old woman trying to carve out space in a youth-obsessed industry. It shifts context, alters perception, and reframes every stage of her story. The question then sharpens. If this is accurate, why would the official age be something else? Now, there are two portraits on the table. Version 1, written in ink, the palace-approved Meghan Markle, born August 4th, 1981, age 44 in 2025. This version is everywhere, repeated until it feels carved into stone. Version 2, drawn in pencil, the one hinted at by Thomas Markle's memories, Samantha's consistent claims, and that persistent 17-page, placing her birth around 1975 or 1976 and making her closer to 50 today. If one birth year is wrong, then a whole life story has been built around the wrong foundation. That is where the investigation stops being just about dates and becomes about biology. Age is not just a number in royal storytelling, it matters profoundly once pregnancies enter the frame. When Meghan and Prince Harry announced they were expecting Archie, the world embraced the fairy tale. Glowing photos, soft focus coverage, a perfect narrative of joy. If Meghan was born in 1981, she would have been 37 during Archie's pregnancy, already in the category clinicians call advanced maternal age. But if the second timeline is right, and she was actually born around 1975 or 1976, that would have made her 42 or 43, which pushes her further into a high-risk category, where doctors watch more closely, run more tests, and follow stricter protocols. At that point, the royal birth story stops being just charming and becomes medically relevant. The serene, candlelit hospital room Harry describes, birthing balls, soft music, and a rapid, effortless recovery does not match what medical professionals describe as standard procedure for high-risk pregnancies in that setting. This leads into the next fracture, the timeline of Archie's birth. The story presented to the public suggests Meghan labored, received 2 epidurals, delivered Archie, recovered, and was discharged from the hospital, all within roughly 2 hours. Meanwhile, the drive from Portland Hospital to Frogmore Cottage alone can take close to an hour or more, depending on conditions. That would mean the entire process, labor, stabilization, monitoring, paperwork, and discharge, would have had to fit into roughly 1 hour. From a medical standpoint, that does not hold. After an epidural, patients cannot simply stand up and walk out. The lower body remains numb for some time, and staff must monitor blood pressure, vital signs, and any signs of complications. Guidelines and patient accounts consistently suggest monitoring for several hours after an epidural, with typical discharge often many hours or even a day or more later, especially for older mothers or those with risk factors. Add in the possibility, raised by some commentators, that early signs of conditions like preeclampsia might have been present, and rapid discharge becomes even less plausible. Placed side by side, the age discrepancy, the birth narrative, the compressed medical timeline, the story stops looking messy in a human way and starts looking curated. None of these pieces shout on their own. They sit quietly. A father's calm admission, a sister's unwavering account, a magazine line from 1997, a hospital timeline that does not fit the standards described by medical staff. But when you pull back, they form a picture that feels less like a simple life unfolding and more like a script that has been edited. Real lives have rough edges, awkward gaps, odd dates that do not line up perfectly, but those are usually explained, not smoothed into silence. Here, the edges are not addressed. They are painted over. That is why Thomas eventually spoke. That is why that obscure magazine page matters so much. That is why the birth story feels constructed rather than lived. Because behind the polished royal narrative, behind the official statements and beautifully staged images, lies a quieter, more unsettling possibility. A rewritten age, a revised birth story, an identity adjusted to fit the role. And once you notice the erased lines, the dates that strain belief, the timelines that do not survive basic scrutiny, you cannot unsee them. This is not the conclusion of the saga. This is the point where the curtain finally shifts. As more evidence surfaces and more inconsistencies slip through the gaps, the loudest question is no longer whether one detail was altered. It becomes, if the age, the birth, and the medical story were reshaped, what else in this narrative has been redrawn to match?